Hello and welcome back to the hivrnatestguide.com YouTube channel, your trusted source for HIV testing with over 4,500 HIV testing labs across the United States. For more information, check the link in the description of this video or the bio section of our channel.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is always to take some of the most complex, most critical source material out there. We're talking journal articles, deep research, and really distill it into the insights you need.
And today we are diving into a topic that has, just cast a shadow over global health for 40 years.
This search for a cure for HIV.
Exactly. And we're not just looking back, we are unpacking some truly groundbreaking new research.
Yeah, this deep dive is all about tangible new trial data that suggests a long sought after goal, what they call a functional cure for HIV, is maybe moving from wishful thinking into, well, a realistic possibility.
It's all being driven by this really strategic engineered intervention using these incredibly powerful targeted antibodies.
And when you just think about the sheer scale of this, it's staggering.
Oh, it's huge.
We're talking about, what, an estimated 40 million people around the world living with HIV. And for decades, that diagnosis was a death sentence.
It was. And then, the scientific revolution brought us antiretroviral drugs, ARVs, and that just changed the entire narrative.
A total game changer.
Completely. ARVs were, and they still are, a triumph of modern medicine. If you adhere to the daily regimen, you can suppress the virus to undetectable levels. You can't transmit it. You can live a long, healthy life.
But that's the key word right there, isn't it? Adherence. It's for life. And when you look closely at the data, ARVs, as life-saving as they are far from a perfect solution.
Absolutely not. Even with perfect adherence, the reality is that people living with HIV on ARVs, they still generally face a slightly shorter lifespan.
Right.
There's this ongoing, chronic inflammatory burden that comes with the virus, even when it's suppressed.
And that doesn't even touch on the practical, the social costs. The financial expense is significant, the psychological demand of a daily pill.
Every single day.
And then, maybe most painfully, the social stigma that still somehow surrounds the diagnosis.
Precisely. And one of the lead researchers we're talking about today, Sarah Fidler, she frames it perfectly. She says, for the last 20 years, the question has been, how can we do better?
Right.
ARVs stabilize things, but they don't erase the burden.
So the goal is to stop just managing it and actually achieve a true sustained remission. As Fidler says, the goal is to shift the dial.
And that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
The data from two independent landmark trials, the FRSS trial and the RIO trial. They've used these engineered antibodies to push us towards that functional cure.
Long-term control of the virus without constant medication.
That's the critical distinction, moving from external chemical control to internal biological control. But to really appreciate why this data is so stunning, we first have to understand the enemy.
Okay.
So let's start with that central challenge. Why has curing HIV been so impossible for all these decades? Why is this virus considered a master of disguise?
That's where we'll start. We know ARVs stop the virus from replicating, but they don't get rid of it. So what are the two sort of core biological reasons that let HIV evade a complete cure?
Well, HIV is just. It's a puzzle that's built for evasion. And these mechanisms are why it's one of the most formidable targets in all of virology.
Okay, so what's the first one?
The first is its sheer, relentless pace of mutation. We call it rapid evolution.
Okay, break that down for us. Rapid evolution. How fast are we talking, and what does that mean for our immune system?
Think of the virus as operating an assembly line with absolutely no quality control.
Okay.
When HIV copies itself, its replication enzyme makes mistakes, a lot of them. These errors are mutations, and HIV makes them at a rate that's just far higher than almost any other virus we know.
So in a single person, you get thousands of different variants.
In a matter of days or weeks after infection, yes. You're not fighting one virus, you're fighting this constantly shifting swarm of viral cousins.
So the immune system is always a step behind.
Exactly. It's a constant arms race. Your immune system might finally produce an antibody that works against the original strain, but by then the virus has already changed its coat, its surface proteins.
And the original antibody is useless.
Useless. The immune system is perpetually playing catch-up, and because of that speed, it always loses the race.
Which makes designing a single vaccine seem almost impossible. So what's the second, maybe even more stubborn challenge?
That would be latency. This is what we see in the viral reservoirs. This is the mechanism that has made lifelong ARV treatment a necessity.
And this is where the virus physically hides inside our own cells, right?
Right. HIV is a retrovirus, so it inserts its own genetic material, its provirus, directly into the DNA of our own host cells, specifically memory T cells.
So it literally becomes a part of our own biological blueprint in those cells.
It does, and once it's in there, it can just go dormant, inactive. And that dormant state is the reservoir.
So the cell looks completely healthy.
Completely healthy and normal. It's not producing any viral proteins, which makes it totally invisible to the immune system's killer cells, and, crucially, invisible to all of our antiretroviral drugs.
Because the ARVs only target active replication. The virus actually making new copies of itself?
Precisely. They can't touch the dormant instruction set, the provirus.
Yeah.
So you can suppress the active virus down to undetectable levels, but the moment you stop taking those daily pills,
So reservoirs can wake up?
spontaneously reactivate, start making new virus, flood the system, and you get an immediate catastrophic viral rebound.
Yeah.
That right there guarantees lifelong dependency on the medication.
Which really illustrates why we need to be precise when we talk about a cure. There are different levels of success here.
There are. The ultimate goal, the unicorn, is the complete cure, total eradication, wiping out every single integrated provirus from every cell.
And that's only happened in a handful of cases, right? The Berlin patient, the London patient.
Exactly. And those all involved high-risk stem cell transplants for cancer, where the donor cells just happen to have a rare genetic mutation that made them resistant to HIV.
So it's a proof of concept, but it's not a scalable solution for 40 million people.
Not at all. It shows it's biologically possible, but it's not a public health solution. And that's why the focus of almost all the research today, and our deep dive, is on the functional cure.
Or remission.
Remission, yes.
Yeah.
It means long-term control, keeping the virus undetectable without needing daily pills. The virus might still be hiding in tiny reservoirs, but your immune system has been taught how to manage it.
So the challenge isn't eliminating the blueprint, it's reprogramming the body to control it. Which brings us to the strategy. How do you train an immune system to fight an enemy that's constantly changing and hiding?
Well, the insight actually came from observing this fascinating, rare phenomenon in nature.
Okay.
Scientists noticed that some people with long-term HIV do eventually, after years, produce antibodies that are powerful enough to neutralize a huge range of viral strains.
But by then it's too late. The damage is done, the reservoirs are established.
It's too late, correct. But it provided the blueprint. It showed us what a winning antibody looks like. So the thinking was, what if we could isolate those, optimize them, and then deliver them much, much earlier?
And these are the super antibodies, the broadly neutralizing antibodies, or bNAbs.
Exactly. The name says it all, broadly neutralizing. They don't just work against one strain, but against a whole multitude of HIV subtypes. And that's critical for beating that rapid evolution problem.
Right. Gets around the moving target issue.
It does. Think of regular antibodies as throwing darts at a wall. Most bNAbs are like snipers. They target these critical, highly conserved parts on the surface of the virus.
And conserved just means these are the parts that rarely, if ever, change.
Yes, because they are structurally indispensable. They're the parts of the virus's outer protein that it uses to physically attach to and infect our cells. If the virus mutates those sites, you can't infect anything. It's locked in.
It's the virus's Achilles heel. It's the perfect target. So the whole scientific race now is to find the most potent bNAbs that hit these spots and then engineer them into a therapeutic that you can just inject into a patient.
And that's the core strategy in the RO trials. You're not giving the patient a drug. You're giving them a supercharged immune weapon.
A custom-designed weapon, yeah. And these trials are, I would say, arguably the most promising attempts yet to use engineered bNAbs to get to a functional cure.
And the engineering side of this must be incredibly complex. How do you make a biological agent, like an antibody, stay active in the body for 6 months?
That is a massive technical hurdle. They use bNAbs that were specifically modified to extend their half-life. So a single injection can remain at therapeutic levels in your body for about half a year.
Wow.
And that provides this protective shield while your own immune system hopefully gets up to speed.
Okay, let's talk about a key detail that speaks directly to that evolution challenge we discussed. The trials used paired antibodies, not just one. That was essential, absolutely strategic. They recognized that even with one powerful bNAb, the virus might eventually find a way around it with a single mutation.
But if you use two different antibodies that target two distinct critical sites,
you raise the bar for evasion exponentially. The virus would need to develop multiple simultaneous mutations to evade both, all while still being able to infect cells.
Which is much, much less likely.
Exactly. It dramatically decreases the odds of resistance. It's like building a genetic firewall. And this combination approach is a huge reason these trials saw the success they did.
That technical depth really sets the stage. We know the challenge, we know the strategy. So let's get into the actual data. Let's look at the results from the RIO and FRES trials.
Okay, so the overall design was, well, it was elegant, but also very high stakes. All the participants were living with HIV and were already on stable ARV therapy.
So their virus was already suppressed.
Correct. They received an injection of the engineered paired bNAbs, and then their daily ARV treatment was paused.
That must have been a moment of just intense anxiety for everyone involved.
A huge act of trust. They were essentially betting that this new intervention was strong enough to replace the known life-saving drugs. The core metric was time. How long could you stay off ARVs while your viral load stayed undetectable?
And if the virus started to come back, the ARVs were resumed immediately.
Immediately. Participant safety was paramount.
Okay, so let's start with the RIO trial. This was based in the UK and Denmark, led by Sarah Fiedler. Tell us about the people in this study.
So RIO involved 34 participants. The demographic was pretty specific, predominantly white men around 40 years old, most with the HIV-1 clade B strain, which is common in Europe.
And a key factor was that they all started ARV treatment pretty soon after they were infected.
That was a key inclusion criterion, yes. Early treatment, which, as you said, suggests their immune systems were more intact and their viral reservoirs were probably smaller.
And they had a control group, which is so important for context.
Absolutely critical. They had another 34 control participants who went through the exact same process. They paused their ARVs, but they only got a saline infusion, a placebo.
And that control group confirmed what we already suspected about the reservoirs, I imagine.
It confirmed the brute force of latency. The results were predictable, but necessary. Almost all of them had to go back on ARVs within a startlingly short window, 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
All but 3 were back on ARVs within 20 weeks. So it proves that if you just stop the drugs, the reservoir wakes up. Rebound is swift and inevitable.
So that's the baseline. Failure is the natural outcome. Against that, what happened to the 34 participants who got the bNAbs?
The immediate results were really encouraging. The antibodies did their job. 22 of the 34 recipients successfully maintained viral suppression and hadn't rebounded by the 20-week mark.
Okay, that's a great initial response. But the real measure of a functional cure is what happens long-term, after the antibodies are gone.
And this is where the RIO data really starts to shift the dial that kept tracking everyone. And the critical finding came much, much later.
How much later?
Beyond 2 full years. 6 of the 34 participants have maintained sustained viral control for at least 2 years.
2 years with no ARVs.
Completely off ARVs, virus undetectable, and this persisted long after the engineered antibodies themselves had disappeared from their bodies.
So 6 out of 34, that's about 17%. It's a modest success rate, but 2 years of drug-free remission is scientifically monumental.
It's monumental because it suggests something fundamental has changed in their own immune system. The antibodies were just the catalyst.
Right. But it does raise the question, why did it only work for that 17%? Why did the other 83% eventually rebound?
They're still analyzing that. It likely comes down to a couple of factors. Either their specific virus had some pre-existing resistance that allowed it to escape, or their viral reservoir was just too large or diverse for the newly trained immune system to handle on its own.
So the 17% were the ones, the sort of perfect biological setup for success.
A small, manageable reservoir and a virus that was fully susceptible to that specific bNAb cocktail.
Yes. It underscores that we're still in the optimization phase. Okay, let's turn to the RSH trial in South Africa. This one was led by virologist Thumbi Ndongo.
And the FRESH cohort was very different, which is great for generalizability. This was 20 young women from a high-prevalence community in South Africa.
And they were targeting a different viral strain, clade C.
Clade C, yes, which is dominant in sub-Saharan Africa. But like RIO, they had that prerequisite of early treatment. They started ARVs within days of their initial infection.
So different demographic, different clades, same early treatment. What were the results?
Very similar and just as encouraging. 6 of the 20 participants retained viral suppression for 48 weeks, a full year.
So that's a 30% success rate at 1 year.
A bit higher than RIO's initial rate. Yeah, the smaller group. And of those 6, 4 remained off treatment for more than a year.
And what's the longest success story from FRESH?
1 participant remains completely off all antiretroviral medication 2.5 years after the intervention.
2.5 years. So that pushes the durability even further, and it shows it works across different populations and viral clades.
It really does. But there's a human detail from the hivrnatest trial that I think is so important to mention.
What's that?
2 of the other participants who were successfully controlling the virus, they eventually chose to go back on treatment.
Even though their immune systems were working.
Even though they were holding the line. And it's a profound reminder that this operates in the real world. Sustained suppression isn't a cure in the sense that you can just forget about it.
Right. It requires intense monitoring, constant testing.
And that psychological burden of uncertainty that demand on your time, for some people, the peace of mind of a guaranteed daily pill is just preferable.
That makes total sense. The mental load of wondering what if must be huge.
It absolutely can be.
Yep.
But the biological fact remains. For those who stayed off, they achieved sustained control long after the antibodies were gone.
Which brings us to the mechanism. How did this happen? This is where it gets really revolutionary. The suggestion that the intervention prompted an ongoing independent immune response.
This is it. This is the climax of the story. Researchers believe the bNAbs acted less like a drug and more like a vaccine. They taught the body how to fight.
How?
Well, they neutralized the active virus, but critically, they also attached to infected cells. By attaching, they acted as these highly specific, persistent beacons.
Signaling the enemy is here.
Exactly. Signaling to the body's own immune cells to come in and destroy those targeted cells and particles. And that process of clearing the virus provided the perfect training scenario for the most crucial part of the long-term defense.
The T cells.
The T cells. The bNAbs were the initial intelligence, the targeting system. But the real soldiers that established the long-term independent control were the T cells.
Specifically the CD8 plus T cells, the killer cells.
That's right. The stimulation from the bNAbs is believed to have just profoundly boosted the effectiveness of these CD8 plus T cells.
Which, in a normal HIV infection, get exhausted or just can't keep up.
They get exhausted, exactly. But here, the theory is that the bNAbs provided this temporary peace, this effective targeting, and that allowed the CD8 plus T cells to become these highly effective hunters. They developed an immune memory.
So the bNAbs gave them the blueprint, and the T cells learned the lesson and remembered it.
That's the self-sustaining defense. That immune memory allows the body to constantly patrol and neutralize any low levels of virus that might try to emerge from the reservoirs later on.
And this outcome sounds a lot like what we see in those incredibly rare people, the elite controllers.
It's a very similar outcome. Elite controllers are the tiny fraction, less than 1%, of people who can naturally suppress the virus without ever taking drugs. Nature gave them the immune memory we're trying to engineer.
So these trials, for a subset of patients, temporarily transformed them into functional elite controllers.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why an expert like Joel Blankson at Johns Hopkins sees this as such a critical turning point. He says this process might teach us how to be able to do this much more effectively. We now have a clear target. Boost that CD8 plus T cell memory.
But that brings us back to the big challenge we keep circling, the viral reservoirs. We've established that the success in these trials really depended on patients who started ARVs early when their reservoirs were small.
That was a clear prerequisite, yes.
So what does this mean for the vast majority of people living with HIV, the people who were chronically infected for years before starting treatment, who have these large, diverse reservoirs?
That is the biggest translational challenge. Blankson is cautiously optimistic. He notes that this kind of post-treatment control can happen in chronically infected patients. It just happens much, much less often.
So the strategy could still apply, but it would need to be, what,
Stronger or more aggressive, yes. For chronically infected patients, the reservoirs are bigger, the virus is more diverse, and their immune systems are more exhausted.
So you might need different combinations of bNAbs or multiple cycles of treatment.
Likely both. Maybe even bNAb cocktails tailored to a patient-specific virus. And you'd almost certainly need a more aggressive strategy to deal with the dormant virus itself.
Let's talk about that. How did these trials try to address those stubborn reservoirs?
Well, the RIO trial provided a really fascinating, unexpected finding here. Traditionally, we didn't think antibodies could touch the dormant reservoir.
Right, because the cells are invisible.
But the RIO results suggested the treatment did affect the dormant cells, and the theory ties back to those supercharged T cells.
Okay.
The idea is that a latently infected cell, while mostly invisible, might occasionally express tiny trace amounts of HIV proteins on its surface. Just a whisper of the virus.
A signal that a normal, tired T cell might miss, but that these newly trained T cells could pick up on.
Precisely. The T cells, with their new potent immune memory, can recognize and kill those cells that display even that trace amount. They become this cleanup crew, systematically shrinking the reservoir over time.
That's profound. So it's not about eradicating the reservoir completely, but about shrinking it and then putting the rest under permanent immune surveillance.
It really pushes the boundary of what we thought T-cell immunity could do.
Now, the FRS trial took a more direct approach to the reservoir, right?
Yeah.
They added another drug, vesatalimod.
They did. This was a deliberate shock-and-kill strategy built into the trial. Vesatalimod is what's called a TLR7 agonist. It's designed to stimulate immune cells and, crucially, to shock those dormant HIV particles out of hiding.
So it wakes the sleeping enemy up, and then what?
Once the dormant virus is shocked into activity, the cell becomes visible to the immune system. You have the bNAbs there to neutralize any new virus particles, and you have the highly trained CD8 plus T cells there to recognize and destroy the newly activated host cell.
A 1-2 punch. Drug-induced visibility, then immune-mediated annihilation.
Exactly. It maximizes the chance of clearing out the reservoir. Ndungu was cautious, saying the results suggest the regimen worked to an extent, but the fact they achieved sustained remission is very promising.
So it's this multi-pronged attack. bNAbs for control and training, T cells for memory, and maybe shock agents to activate the reservoir.
It has to be. HIV is too resilient for anything less.
Okay, so let's look to the future. Given these successes, where do researchers go from here to get that 17 to 30% success rate higher and expand this to more people?
Well, the first step is just that dose of caution. They're cracking participants for viral suppression, not calling them cured, because the possibility of rebound is always there.
Right. So what are the next steps for Ndungu's afresh team in South Africa?
Their focus is on expansion. They're working to get funding for a much larger trial, and critically, this new trial will specifically include chronically infected individuals.
The testing it in the broader population.
Exactly, moving out of that favorable early treatment group.
And what about Fiddler's RIO team? They're already recruiting for a new arm of their trial.
They are, and they're testing this fascinating hypothesis. They're testing whether pausing ARV treatment for a longer period before giving the antibodies leads to a stronger immune response.
That sounds counterintuitive. You're letting the virus come back a little bit.
A little bit, under very close monitoring. The idea is that the immune system needs a visible target to train against. If you let the virus rebound to a slightly higher, but still manageable, level, it presents a bigger target.
It's like sending the T cells to advanced combat training instead of basic drills.
That's a perfect analogy. You're hoping to cement a more potent and lasting immune memory and hopefully increase the number of people who achieve that functional cure.
And there's another related trial, the ABVAX trial, that's adding another component to the mix.
Yes, ABVAX is trying to maximize that vaccine-like effect. They're adding a T-cell stimulating drug directly into the mix with the bNAbs.
So you're hitting the immune system from multiple angles at once.
Exactly. You're providing the weapons with the bNAbs and a generalized activation signal with the T-cell stimulator, hoping to get the best possible memory effect.
This whole research pathway, it just fundamentally changes the outlook on HIV. I mean, for those successful participants, they are living free from the demands of daily treatment for the first time since their diagnosis.
And that experience alone is just monumental. Their own biology is now maintaining control.
So let's just synthesize the key takeaways here. We've seen this tangible shift from lifelong medication being the only option to the realistic prospect of long-term remission.
And it's driven by the precision engineering of these broadly neutralizing antibodies and then that critical development of a durable immune memory carried by the T cells.
The big insight is that the immune system can be coached to fight HIV, this master of disguise. We can unlock the body's own capacity for sustained internal control.
It's a huge victory for HIV research, but I think for immunology as a whole. And when you zoom out, the implications go way beyond this one virus.
What do you mean?
Well, if researchers can successfully engineer an immune memory to control a virus this complex, one that hides in reservoirs and mutates constantly, what does this approach imply for our ability to tackle other chronic diseases?
You mean diseases where latency or immune evasion are also the core challenges?
Exactly. Think about chronic viral infections like latent TB or hepatitis B, or even autoimmune disorders where you need to retrain the immune system.
So the techniques being optimized in these HIV trials could offer a new blueprint for interventions across a whole spectrum of diseases.
The potential transferability of this training manual combining precision targeting with broad immune activation is arguably the most exciting ripple effect of this whole breakthrough. It suggests that for many diseases, the solution might not be constant medication.
But unlocking the dormant power of our own cellular memory.
Precisely.
A truly mind-expanding idea to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.